European Parliament elections are next week and right-wing parties are projected to make major gains. Now, this could have a huge impact on EU policies, including migration and defence. Currently, the mainstream centrist parties, seen here from red to dark blue, hold the majority of seats in the EU Parliament. But if the projections are correct, the far-right Identity and Democracy group, seen here in grey, and the populist right European Conservatives and Reformists group in light blue could gain seats to form a majority with the centre-right European People's Party, or EPP. Now, the far-right is on the rise across Europe. In France, the National Rally is ahead in the polls. The party's president, Jordan Bardella, is campaigning on a nationalist and anti-migration platform. His supporters told DW why they're rallying behind the young politician.
This is the man they've come to see, Jordan Bardella, lead candidate for France's National Rally and the new young face of the far right in Europe. At this rally in the northern French city, Hanon-Beaumont, his message is resonating with voters.
We came to support Bardella so that he makes France shine again, as it deserves to, and that he does the job on the European level, and that he gives us back our place, so to say, which we've lost a bit.
Because he understands the young people. He's there to save us. He understands us. He helps us. And what we are looking for and what we want is that he helps us getting out of the mess France is currently in.
Despite recent attempts to broaden its appeal, the National Rally remains Eurosceptic and anti-immigration. It wants tougher border checks and less power for the European Union.
June the 9th will be a vote of hope, a vote for France's identity against the flood of migrants, a vote for purchasing power and against inflation, a vote to exist in the face of the risk of erasure, a vote to keep France alive in the face of those who would like to see it disappear.
It is a populist message some people in France want to hear. These European elections are mirroring domestic politics in many countries. Far-right parties are polling strongly ahead of the European elections. Political analysts say if they had their way, the far-right National Rally would change the political makeup of the EU.
It would come down to destroying the common market, re-establishing the principle of a national priority, national preference, as they say, for nationally made products, for national corporations. So the whole economic, I would say, foundations of the European Union would collapse.
But that would largely depend on their ability to cooperate with one another within the EU.
We have to remember that it's a long tradition of disagreement on the far right, because these guys are nationalists. So by definition, building a transnational group where you are able to have common, rules, common programs, etc., is more difficult for that kind of parties than for, let's say, Christian Democrats or Greens, right?
Just last week, senior figure Marine Le Pen said her party would no longer cooperate with the far-right Alternative for Germany in the EU Parliament. Whatever the political constellation in Parliament, far-right parties and their voters feel confident they'll make gains in these elections.
And we're joined now by political scientist Cas Mudde, who specialises in extremism in Europe and the US. He wrote the book The Far Right Today, and he's Professor of Politics at the University of Georgia in the United States. Welcome to DW. Polls, as we've been saying, are predicting a surge in support for the far right in the EU elections. Will the far right soon be a part of European mainstream politics, or maybe it is already? What would you say?
To a certain extent, it is already. If you look particularly at the campaign that the European People's Party, the mainstream right group, is leading, then it mostly focuses on issues and uses frames of the far right on immigration, on the European Green Deal. But also, if you look at some of the key immigration policies more recently, then you see, for example, with the EU-Tunisia deal, to keep immigrants from coming to Europe, you see Meloni the far-right Prime Minister of Italy. They're together with Ursula von der Leyen, together there with the Dutch Prime Minister.
So would you say that immigration, for example, is one of the key issues that far-right politicians are managing to tap into? Is that one of the main driving factors?
Yes, you always have to remember that European elections are actually 27 different national elections. And so every election has national issues. But overall, immigration is a key issue in most of the West European countries, in some of the East European countries. But there are other traditional issues like corruption, just general political dissatisfaction. In most cases, the far right still wins on the basis of a protest vote. However, this is not a random protest vote. It's not that people who vote for the far right are just unhappy. They're unhappy about certain issues. They think that crime is too high, corruption is too high, immigration is too high. And immigration is made important in part by other parties.
How concerning do you see this rise in the popularity of far-right politicians and parties?
Well, in itself, we have to remember that about 25% of the votes will go to the far right, which means that 75% of the vote will not go to the far right, which means that if Ursula von der Leyen and the EPP would actually not collaborate with the far right, its power wouldn't be very big. However, when the mainstream right says this, they exclude only the IND group, the group of Le Pen and before their expulsion, the AfD. They do not see the European Conservatives and Reformists of Meloni as a far-right group, even though that group is also far-right. And so in that sense, like, the real threat is in the normalization of far-right parties and far-right issues by mainstream groups, because the power is not going to be at the far right. The power in the new European Parliament will be in the right wing of the European People's Party, which can now play two coalitions against each other. On the one hand, the traditional mainstream coalition with the Social Democrats and the Liberals, and they can put them under pressure by saying, if you don't do what we want, we will go to the far right and make a more right-wing majority.
Kasmuda, political scientist and far-right expert, thank you so much for joining us on DW today.
Welcome.